Hi, everyone. Sorry I missed you today. Hi, everyone. Sorry I missed you today. We had a little mix up with the times. These things happen. But don't worry, the Speech Lab is still here for you this summer as you get ready to become the next group of successful McNair scholars at Grand Valley. I have been working with McNair scholars since 2014 at Grand Valley, and it's honestly my favorite thing to do here. I love working with anyone on any sort of speech or presentation. But as any professor, I think, will tell you, it's so wonderful when you have a group of students that want to learn, that want to do research, that want to go further and get their PhDs. I'm also a first generation college student, so understanding sort of the lost feeling that can come along with that at times. I remember the first day I was on campus, I went home. I just was overwhelmed and got lost. So I commend you for being here. I appreciate you, and you're going to be wonderful. Now, having said all that, let's get to talking a little bit about what I'm going to be doing with you this summer. You may have already heard this, if so, forgive me, but the idea here is that I will talk to you today. Here will be a recorded video. You can go back and rewatch if needed. But then later I'll come back and we'll talk some more details about your upcoming presentations. Then, as you present those presentations, the shortened versions before you have the full conference presentation ready to go, I'll be back to listen to those presentations, give you my feedback and some constructive advice that might be useful. We'll also talk throughout our time together about everything related to speech. And we're going to get into that today. But first, we need to think about something important. That is this. If I were there with you right now, I would ask, what's the first thing you notice about a speaker? Any speaker when it's the first time you've seen them in front of a room on a stage. What's the first thing you look for? Think for just a minute. A lot of answers will say things like how they carry themselves. I think that's true. I think there's a lot to that. How confident they are, how they're dressed, their posture, their gait, that sort of thing. All that might be close, but to me, the very first thing you notice about someone when they're a new speaker is their face. And that's why I am partnering with Premiere by Dead Sea Premiere. I can't even get the joke out right. No, I'm clearly not partnering with them. But I do use this as a purposeful example because I have had an experience with these folks that sell this product, and their workplace is something like this. Now, we have all encountered people at mall kiosks, right? But the folks that work at these particular kiosks are a whole different level of motivated. So I remember once I was in my master's program. I had just finished, I think, the first year. And it was Christmas. So I guess it was the first semester. I was broke as a joke, and I needed Christmas presents. I needed one for my mom, one for my then girlfriend, now wife, and her mom, because I always get something for her mom. So anyway, I go to a store in the mall where I have a credit card, a store card. I go in, I find literally the cheapest things I can find. They won't unwrap and say, "Why did you wrap up garbage, Carl? What is this?" And I thought, okay, well, this will do. So I leave, I go down an escalator. While I'm going down, this kiosk is at the bottom. And I noticed that there is a person working there who looks very, very much like an actress named Cote de Pablo, or Ziva from NCIS, which is mine and your grandmother's favorite show. I know. So when I'm noticing her, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to be a creeper, and I'm not a creeper. So, but I am just taking it all in, like, wow, she is strikingly similar to the actress. So I try to keep my head down, and when I get to the bottom of the escalator, I see 2 feet in front of me, and it's her, and she's seen me apparently, and she puts her hands out and says, "Come with me." And I said, "Okay, wherever you want to go." So we go back to the kiosk here, and she asked me when I washed my hands, and I'm thinking, a couple hours ago. Oh, I bet you're filthy. And then she exfoliates my hands. This is what I found out. I didn't know what it was at the time because I had exfoliated nothing. But it looked terrible, all this stuff that came off. Long story short, she persuaded me to purchase $265 worth of skincare products when I had $300 left on a credit card that was supposed to get me through the month. Right? I was past checking your bank balance. That was just laughable at this point. My bigger takeaway is that you can be this persuasive, but not about skincare products. You are researchers, you are scholars. You need to be able to not only be as passionate as they are, but as clear and as effective as they are with making other people understand the value of the work that you do. So, we're going to talk about effective research presentations today, and this again will be part one because more will come soon. What we're going to cover, though, are why we do papers and presentations, some similarities and differences. I think that's an important topic because we're very familiar with papers, but less so with presentations. I want to talk to you then about the difference between a course presentation, like an in-class presentation that you're used to, and a conference presentation that might be new, or a professional style presentation. Third, we'll talk about some basic structure and a little bit of advanced content, some things that are advanced but don't seem that way until they make a big difference in your work. Next to last, you see clarity and repetition and how important both are. And last, we'll talk about managing speech anxiety. I'm sure no one here is nervous at all, but we'll still touch on it anyway. I also, at the very end, want to show you a website we're working on at the Speech Lab that is for your use when it's time. And, I want to make sure that you know that resource is there. But first, let's get into it. Papers and presentations. I think it's a good question to ask here at the top. Why are you speaking? Didn't you just write a paper on this? Yes, of course you did. That's what got you here to this conference. Now we're doing the paper presentation. Think about the reasons for this. First of all, it's sort of like the Cliff's Notes versions. You don't want to try, please don't, to include everything in that paper in a 10-minute presentation. It's not going to work out well. Time is very valuable. It might take people 30, 45 minutes to read a full-on paper, but this presentation is the author choosing the highlights and packaging it into a 10-minute block so that we can take it, understand it, and decide if we want more. Then we can read the paper. Now, another real big benefit of a presentation, and you may find this in this program, is that it allows you to customize your content based on who the audience is. What I mean there is not that you change the results or anything. No, please don't get that confused. But the style that you use, the elements of the paper you may choose to highlight could vary from group to group. I mean, if you are, let's say, talking about the importance of saving trees from, I know there's lots of different projects I've listened to in McNair about trees and bugs that eat trees. I'll go with that. Let's say that you're talking to a group of kids about this. It's important they understand it so that they can, be part of the solution and be invested as they grow up in nature and in their world will have left to them. But you're going to use much different language than if you talk to a group of arborists, right? People who specialize in trees. You're definitely going to use different terminology. You're going to show that you have this knowledge of the topic to these folks because you all can mutually understand each other. The kids can't. So when you're with an audience, if it's let's say a mixed audience in terms of academic discipline, you probably don't want to silo yourself in terms of the language that you use only being accessible to people in your field. You want to try to broaden that. At the same time, if it's at a very specialized conference, you'll want to make sure that the other folks see that you all are in fact on the same page, that you know the terminology and you know how to use it. Two last ideas here. When you're thinking about taking a paper and moving that to a presentation and you're deciding what goes into it and what's going to be left out, ask yourself what the audience wants and needs to know. To be clear, this isn't what they want you to tell them, but the information they need to know. What are the action items? What can they do with this? What does it all mean and how will it impact them either now or in the future? And the last idea here, it just says single sentence. And to me, that's so important. If you can summarize your entire presentation into a single sentence, you're going to be in an excellent position to start a presentation. Let me explain. I know that it's hard to take a 10-minute talk and put it into a single sentence. It's impossible to do that. And I'm not talking about sentences with 8 semicolons, 3 dashes, and 18 commas. We're talking about a nice, succinct, clear sentence. Now, think about your favorite movie for a second, whatever that might be. The example I'll go with is Finding Nemo, just because most people have seen it. If you go to imdb.com, which is the International Movie Database, and you look up Finding Nemo, you will find a 1-sentence summary of the movie. And it goes something to the effect of, a timid clownfish goes on an adventure to find his son. Wait a minute. The movie's called Finding Nemo, right? Oh, the whole sentence is about his dad. That's the angle they decided to take. They didn't want to give away too much about Nemo's adventures and Dory and the sharks and the jellyfish and the dentist's office and the little girl and oh man, right? All this stuff. They wanted to leave it a little bit vague so that they could fill in the details as they progressed. That's what you should do with your presentation. Have that sentence together. It's hard. Maybe start out with 4 or 5 and then condense. But if you can get there, you're going to put yourself in a good position so that as you create your presentation, you just need to make sure everything else that you include supports that statement that you have made as the thesis of your presentation. Now, when you think about presentations in general, most of the time we think of in-class presentations. Me as well. I mean, I've seen many more of those than I have conference presentations. It's because I teach many students. Now, there are many similarities between course and conference presentations, or course, school, and professional presentations. Here are the big differences, though. For course presentations, you're going to show what you know. As for conference or professional presentations, you're showing what you found. And what I mean here is, in class, you want to show the professor that you understood the assignment, not to make a TikTok joke. But when you do that, you check some boxes. You include some stuff that shows the professor, oh, look, I did my homework. I read that. The conference is less concerned with that sort of stuff. Like, oh, don't tell us just what you know. Tell us what you found. What is so interesting that brings you here? Next, for course presentations, it says show what you've learned. And again, you want to show how you have progressed in your knowledge of the topic through a particular class. However, for the professional setting, you want to show how what you have found can be used. That's really why people are there. I mean, in academia, we love when people have great ideas. We want to think about those and ponder them. In the outside world, many people think, oh, great idea. What can I do with it? Can I use it? I can't? Okay, moving on. And so we want to be as clear as we can with the audience in terms of how what we're telling them can be useful. Finally, in a course presentation, you will often show the process. In other words, show your work, basically, like in a math class. You want to explain your steps. It could be important to do that in a conference presentation, but it's much more important to show why something matters. So for example, in class, if you were presenting a research paper, you would want to discuss briefly, at least, the literature review and the method sections. But for a conference presentation, if you found some really interesting stuff, you may just say, hey, I set up an experiment, I ran it this way, 30 seconds worth of description. Here are the findings for the next 9 minutes, right? It's going to vary from person to person and project to project, but always focus for these sorts of presentations on what you have found, how it can be used, and why it matters. All right, next up. Sorry, I used to use a regular burger. Then I switched to a veggie burger to be more thoughtful, and boy, that thing just looks terrible to me. But I've got it on the screen for a reason. It's not just there because I'm a big guy that's talking to you at lunchtime. Instead, I think of this burger as a perfect model for an outline, or at least a really good one. Here's how I get there. The top of the bun is the introduction, and the bottom of the bun is the conclusion. All the stuff in the middle that's delicious, that we're there for, that's what we want. Well, that's the body. Now, the interesting thing to me about the introduction and the conclusion is that before this became a hamburger bun, this was a single piece of bread, right? Like a roll. Someone had to cut it and put the good stuff in the middle. And that's the way I think of introductions and conclusions. They're really the same thing, they're just sort of different parts of the same thing. And I'll explain that as we go. So for introductions, I want to highlight here for a minute the importance of not starting your presentation with your name. Please don't. Please don't start with, hi, my name's whatever, and I'm going to tell you about the thing. No, no, no. Instead, start with an attention getter. You could use questions to get the audience thinking. Now, there are good and bad sorts of questions, and here's what I mean, not like the content necessarily, but you probably do not want to ask the audience an open-ended question where you want a real verbal response. Remember, you're on a time schedule. And if someone decides they want to talk for 30 minutes and they're giving you sort of a really sad story that goes along with the question you asked, do you really want to cut them off? You'd have to almost, but boy, that could be an awkward moment and could really mess with the chemistry between you and your audience. Now, another thing could be that no one says anything, right? You put this question out there. So somebody tell me about the last time you did it, whatever it is. No, oh, okay, nothing. Okay, well, so I'll tell you about my last time I bought gas or whatever it is, right? So instead of the actual questions with verbal responses, do things like rhetorical questions. You know, those that don't really need a response, but they're really designed just to stimulate thought. Or do show of hands questions. You know, so how many of you have been on vacation in the past 10 years? You know, raise your hand. How many of you have been to another state on vacation? Keep your hand up. Okay. How many of you have, you see where we're going with this? It gets the audience involved mentally and physically, actually. You don't have to go with questions if those don't work well for you or your topic. Instead, you might go with something like a surprising fact or statistic. So for example, one of the true statistic is that 1 in 4 college students has an STD. So if you were giving a speech on STD awareness in college students, and you started with that statistic, 1 in 4, that might shock some folks. Now, some folks wouldn't really hear you, right? They think 1 in 4, what is that even? Oh, okay. It's not that hard to understand, but some folks are just not going to process it. So what you could do then is count the room, right? Say, okay, there's 16 of you in here. 4 of you have an STD. I don't know who it is. Are you sure it's not you? Have you been tested? Those sorts of things, right? That sort of shock. I wouldn't advise you to use shock factor just for the shock factor. Absolutely not, especially in an academic presentation. But for many examples I have heard in the McNair program, this would work well, whether it is a speech on, you know, this death of trees, when you talk about how many of you have a great memory from being in nature. What if I told you that at the rate of whatever it is, trees are dying, and by this year, the area where you may have enjoyed seeing trees will be gone, right? That is exactly the kind of attention getter you want, because it paints a picture of the importance of listening to what you're saying. Last, you could go with a story, and I find this to be my favorite approach. I also find that this works really well when you start a story in the introduction, you get to a really climactic sort of cliffhanging moment, and then you stop and you deliver the body of the speech. Then at the end, in the conclusion, at the very last part of your speech, you can come back and finish your story. This keeps people on the edge of their seat, especially if you're a good storyteller with an interesting story. Now, understand that your story, A, can be about you if you have a story. B, could be about someone else if you have their permission or if you keep them anonymous. It could be a made-up story as long as you don't claim it's true. It's called a hypothetical illustration. So you could just make up characters to, you know, give the example. You know, you've got lots of different options here that you can use for a story. Again, though, if you can find one where you can get to an interesting point and stop and then finish later, you're going to keep the audience connected. I was at a speaking competition once, I lived in Tennessee, and The five finalists for extemporaneous speakers were ready to go. They all went. The last guy's up. He gives this speech on truth, and basically his attention getter starts with a story about he says, first off, I want to tell you about a young man, 8 years old, came to this country with his parents legally and wanted to live the American dream. And then he talks about how hard they worked as a family, and the sacrifices that were made. He talks about the little boy getting injured and that they didn't know if he was going to make it. And then he stopped. And then he gave the speech. Everybody in that room was wondering, what happened to the little boy, man? How are you not going to tell us? Oh, here it comes at the end. And it worked. I remember every bit of his speech because I listened to find out what was going to happen. That could work for you. Regardless, once you get the audience's attention, then tell them who you are and what you're working on. I like to include a purpose statement. Basically, this is a listening goal. I like to use the words, by the end of this presentation, you should. And that's, if it's informative, you could say, you should know more about this particular issue. Or if it's persuasive, and I think most things are, you should agree with me that this is an important topic that needs to be addressed. And so that is sort of the purpose. That's why you're there. Lots of times in your professional lives, in academia, you're going to need to get funding for your research. And so this will be a big way you will use these skills sometimes to put together that sort of proposal that you can go and talk to people about to try to get the funding that you need. Of course, credibility can be important in a speech. If you have that because you've worked on this for, hours and hours, or you've studied it, you're working with another expert. I know all of you have a mentor. Include that. That thesis is the one-sentence summary of your speech that I've already mentioned. And then the preview. So this is where you list off your main points by name. I would have 3 main points. And here you will say, today I'm going to talk to you about maple trees, ash trees, and sycamore trees. To begin, let's talk about maple trees. That's how this will work. And that's your transition right into the body. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, except to say this. Look at your body of the paper. It's very similar here. You will adapt it, the content, the link, that sort of thing. Translate the language if needed. If you wrote the paper in a very technical way, but you now need to not be so technical with this particular audience, you have options available that you can, as the speaker, really think about what would be the appropriate changes to make to ensure I connect with my audience. Again, knowing about your audience is important. Then we'll go to the conclusion. First of all, I like to tell people that I think it's fine to signal you're at the end, saying the words to wrap things up or in conclusion. I know some speech instructors and professionals don't like that idea, and the thinking is, it's just too cliche. But I don't know. Think about your own experience as an audience member, and when someone says, "So to wrap things up," I don't know about you, but I always perk up, right? I'm sort of like, wait, this is going to be the wrap up here. I think it's a good idea. After you do that, though, restate your thesis. So now you can see that Finding Nemo was about a timid clownfish that went on an adventure to save his son. Great. There's some future research that you probably have included in your discussion, but you might name it here if it's very important or something that you specifically plan to do next. Then review the main points by name. Today we talked about maple, ash, and sycamore trees. And finally, reach the closure. This is the idea that everything comes full circle. By the way, I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan. I've honestly never seen the movies. Sorry. But when I think of the ring, I think ring structure. And in a speech, ring structure means that you use the same material for your introduction, your attention getter rather, as you do for your closure. So again, start the story there, finish the story at the bottom. If I use that statistic, let's say 1 in 4 of you, has an STD of some sort, whether you know it or not. Well, at the end, I can come around and say, look, at the beginning, you may have been shocked to find out the numbers who have STDs in college. Well, if that disturbed you, I want you to think about that number until you're comfortable enough to go get tested, because until you're sure, that number could be you, right? And so now you're coming full circle. You're finishing where you started, and it is nice to an audience to see that you can do that and connect your thoughts. If you want to think of all three of these things as a full outline, you can, and here's what it might look like. You can take that for what it's worth. There are other outlines available to you from the Speech Lab. If you need something to start out, just let us know, and we're happy to send you one. Now, I want to cover a few other topics here. And again, this is part one. So this is going to be the briefer version, or the more surface level version, to get us on the same page. But I want you to know that speakers, they do three things. The really great speakers do three things. First of all, they build in repetition. They always build in repetition. And if you see the image there, you're thinking the I Have a Dream speech. And you know, the name of the speech is actually the March on Washington speech, but we call it the I Have a Dream speech because that is what is memorable. And why is it memorable? Built-in repetition, right? I have a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and slave owners can sit down at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day our nation can rise up and live out the full potential of its creed. I mean, this over and over again. Now, for that particular speech, which I think is the greatest speech ever recorded, at least, there was, I think, 8 different elements of repetition in there. Go back to, he's telling people, go back to where you were from. Don't stay here where, we're all together and comfortable a little bit. Go back where it's not comfortable. Again, connecting with that audience in that place at that time about that issue, those issues. I mean, my goodness, how supreme. Now, it can feel awkward for you as a speaker, honestly, to do that. And I'm not giving you the advice to do it sermonically like Dr. King did. I have a dream that, no, but you could use it, going back to the tree example. If we don't act, the trees will not be there the way they are now. If we don't act, the children of tomorrow will not have this thing. If we don't act, how can we think that we're responsible? You see what I'm saying, right? So you don't have to be as dramatic and sort of eloquent in the way that Dr. King was, but definitely think about how you can use the tools in your own way. Now, the second thing great speakers do, they take notes. They usually start out with some sort of a paper or a written version, and then that changes over to the actual speech. What I'll tell you here is simply use good speaker notes. Practice this thing, edit it. I know you all have no shortage of work to do, but the more you can do in the editing of the paper, the easier it is often to move to a speech version. And the last thing I think great speakers do, they focus on clarity. They focus on clarity. Some are better than others. Now, Dr. King, I think greatest speaker we have a record of all time. He wasn't the clearest speaker because he was a minister, right? He's preaching, again, in a sermonic way as he speaks. Realize that for us, that's not appropriate in an academic conference, right? We want to be much more, I guess, down to earth almost, right? Dr. King was an inspirational figure, obviously, and his speeches matched that. I don't want you to feel like your research is not inspirational, because it is, no matter what it's on. But you need to find the way to express it that's appropriate and that your audience is going to connect with. And again, that depends on who's out there. And the more you know about that, the better off you'll be. Speaking of speaker's notes, here are my thoughts on them. First of all, make it a single sheet of paper. Let me grab a sheet of paper here, actually. One moment. Okay, so I know it can be tough to see, but if you think about this as one single sheet of paper, when you are making speaking notes, you can write them by hand or you can type them, either way. But take the sheet of paper and fold it in half from top to bottom. Okay, now we've got it this way. Let's fold it one more time across from side to side. Now, what I want you to do after you do that with your piece of paper is to watch your favorite show for 30 minutes and just keep doing this the entire time. Just keep working in the two creases. Just flip it back and forth. And eventually that will become really soft and really quiet. Then, if you think of it this way, this can be page 1 of your notes. You can open it up. This is page 2. This is page 3. And this becomes page 4. The reason this is such a good idea, I think, is that it It's so much better than note cards, for example. It's about the size of a note card, but if you drop this, it doesn't come apart. If you get this out of order, it's really easy to find where you're supposed to be. There are many advantages to this over a note card, but I think you can use whatever system that works best for you, but please at least consider something like this. It's quiet, it doesn't make noise. Many people with note cards sort of get T-Rex arms, and they're all up here and they just sort of doing their number, but they're flipping the cards. We want to make sure that you've got it so that you can understand it. Also, this is only for you, so who cares what it looks like? If you understand it, that's what matters. For example, when I use speaker notes, I have red, green, and yellow. Or sometimes I'll use black instead of yellow because it's hard to find a yellow pen you can see. But the red and the green, right? Stop, pause, let this just sink in for a minute. Green, connect these two ideas. Yellow, slow down here so that everybody gets it. That works for me. You do what works for you. Definitely put some reminders on there so that you are not completely missing something that is important. I've done that before as a new speaker. I did competitive speaking in high school, and I would make these speaker's notes. And then I would get up and speak and realize at the end, I forgot to look at my notes, right? So you want to make sure that you can get your own attention and you know how that works best. Now, speech anxiety. Again, I know no one here is nervous, but it's important that we briefly discuss it just in case. I want to say this. Speech anxiety is a huge fear in America. It's normal to be nervous. In fact, it might be considered abnormal to not be nervous. So if you're nervous, you're normal. It's a good thing. Surveys after survey, just ask people, what are you most afraid of? Snakes, spiders, death, speaking. Those are your big ones. There's an instrument called the PRCA-24, which is the Personal Report of Communication Apprehension. There are 24 questions. This will tell you how anxious you are about speaking in public. Now, I mentioned before that I used to live in Tennessee. I taught at East Tennessee State University. And at that school, every public speaking class I taught, the first day I had to give you the PRCA-24. Then I went and scored those. Anybody who scored in the bottom 5% or the most nervous, I had to give them a form from the counseling office. They had to sign off that I gave it to them. They did not have to go to the counseling office, but they needed to acknowledge that I gave them information that could be useful. That might seem like a really warm and caring thing to do, but in all honesty, it was an insurance move. If you were nervous, fell down, hit your head on the way, and had some serious issues, the university wanted to be able to say we offered help. Now, what I found super interesting, and I think you will too, is that the people who scored in the top, or I guess in the bottom, I should reverse those, but the folks who were the least nervous, right? Not nervous at all. Those folks got a different form from the counseling center and they had to go. I didn't know why. Like that made no sense to me for the longest time. And then, gosh, it was 2019. I went back and did some stuff there. And I was talking to my old boss about it. And she said, yeah, no, that was to find sociopaths. So this was soon after the Virginia Tech shooting. And the idea was if you weren't nervous about speaking and everyone else was, what else could you do and not be nervous about it? And so there was a real concern for a while. So if you're nervous, guess what? It's all right. It's a good thing. You're normal. Now, there's some things that you can do to deal with anxiety. The best piece of advice I've ever been given with regards to speech anxiety is to keep in mind the illusion of transparency. And for me, this is really powerful. The illusion of transparency basically says when you're nervous and you're in front of a group, you feel as though that group can see inside you. You're transparent. They can see your negative thoughts. They can see your rapid heartbeat. They can see your stomach churning. But in reality, we know they can't see any of that. You're not transparent. And that goes to the statement that's so true. It never looks as bad to the audience as it feels to the speaker. Say that again. When you're nervous, it never looks as bad to the audience as it feels to you, the speaker. Case in point, I taught a summer class, 6 years ago or so now. Had a guy that came in late, made no eye contact. Throughout the class meeting, we're talking the very first class day, speech class. We're talking, it's summer, so it's long. The guy doesn't make any comments. I immediately peg him as the nervous guy. Okay, next class happens and we give introduction speeches. We take volunteers. Well, this guy, of course, was the last to go. In fact, everyone went, and then it was sort of me going through the list and saying, oh, looks like you're up. Okay, last one. He came up and gave one of the best introduction speeches I've ever heard in my life. Now, I was blown away. The whole time I'm just saying, how was I so wrong? Well, after class, he comes up to me and he says, I'm so sorry. I said, well, what are you sorry about, man? I was so nervous during that speech. I know it was terrible. I said, dude, that first of all, that was a really nice job. And second, you didn't look nervous at all, which is bizarre because I thought you were a seriously nervous person. He said, man, I am a seriously nervous person. So, hey, you've got the advantage here because we can't tell. And it was like that from then on, he had a whole new level of confidence in the class. I don't know if it translated outside of the class or not, but at least in my class, he did. So keep that in mind. It's never as bad as it feels. The other thing to keep in mind is you need to know your symptom. If you can prepare for it, you can handle it, at least in a better way than if you are caught off guard. So if you know you're going to give a presentation and for example, your symptom is a nervous stomach, avoid heavy, rich, greasy food, on speech day or presentation day. If you know that when you get nervous, you sweat, well, don't wear lighter or more airy clothes, right? That's not the temperature's fault that you're sweating. Wear darker or thicker clothes that will hide or absorb the sweat and it won't make it visible to your audience. If you get the nervous shakes, your hands shake a little bit, the first thought might be, boy, I better hold on to this thing that's in front of me, whatever it is. A couple things about that. One, there may not be a thing in front of you. There may be no lectern, right? So you don't want to rely on that to get through. Plus, if it is just one of the lecterns that sit on top of the table, that thing's loose. That's going to shake and vibrate as your hands shake and vibrate. What you really should do here is practice gesturing more. Really think about being precise and showing a small and large and started here, we moved here, we finished over there kind of stuff. So gesture more. And last, if you have a rapid heartbeat, avoid caffeine to extreme degrees. I know I have to have mine in the morning, but don't overdo it. Don't make that day sort of the one where you decide to chug a couple Red Bulls and take on the world. That's not what you need to go for. We want to make sure that you stay as calm as possible. The last thing I'll talk to you about with speech anxiety, just a couple tips that work for almost everyone. Gain speaking experience. I know that can be tough to do, but you can do it in the sort of places you don't think about. Just asking a question, for example, in class is a form, I think, of public speaking, in that you are using your voice in front of others who are judging you. And so just doing that will get you more comfortable with the process. If you're a member of a group, asked to read the announcements or say something there. And of course, the speech lab is here to help. Being prepared is so important. It's just like riding a bike. The first time you do it, it's rough, but you get better at it as you practice. So if possible, stand up, of course, speak out, simulate reality as you practice. And of course, the speech lab is again here to help. Next, I want you to understand the power of positive thinking. I also want you to understand the limitations of positive thinking. I'm a believer that if you think you're going to fail, you probably will. And if you think you're going to succeed, you're more likely to succeed. That doesn't make it a 100% correlation, right? I believe I can do it, then I'm going to go do it. Doesn't work that way. It takes hard work. As I say here, it's not magic, but if you prepare, you have yourself in a better position to succeed. Think of it like a quiz. If you didn't prepare for a quiz, you come in, you get nervous, and you're just thinking, oh man, why didn't I study for this? Same thing with a presentation. You're going to be less nervous, more confident, and feel more focused if you can prepare and be positive. Speaking of positive, use positive visualization. Now, I have athletes on the screen, and all athletes that I know of, serious ones, use positive visualization, and you see it here. So look at the golfer. Down at the bottom of the screen, you see the top of the golf ball. It's still there, right? So this is just a practice swing, but what he's doing is visualizing himself hitting the ball. Same thing for the softball player. She is in the on deck circle, timing the pitcher, pretending to hit the ball. The basketball player, he is at the foul line, the free throw line, looking at the basket. Now, if you know anything about basketball, you know they don't change the height on the rim. They don't play it outside usually, so there's no wind direction to calculate. This man is just watching the ball go through the basket in his head, and then he makes it happen. It's seeing it, believing it, doing it. This really works for those of you, if you're out there, that are so nervous maybe the night before that you're losing sleep over this. Quit seeing negative things. See this. See yourself giving the speech successfully, better than you could imagine. And it doesn't guarantee you will, but it sets you up in a much better place than if you think you're going to do poorly. Last up here for me, actually I think next to last, but don't expect perfection. There's no such thing. There's just not. I'll tell you, in the I Have a Dream speech, which I've referenced already, if you go back and look at Dr. King's notes, there's arguably two places where he messed up, right, his speech, where he intended to say one thing, but maybe he said another. Maybe he made the decision to change it, on the fly. I don't know. Unfortunately, he can't tell us. But what I'm saying there is not that, there's some devaluation of the speech because there were, maybe potential errors. What I'm telling you is if the greatest speaker ever, giving the greatest speech ever, had a mistake or two, what do you think is going to happen with your speech? A mistake or 2 or 12? Yep, that's what happens with me all the time. Because, there's no such thing as perfect, but we can't make little things big things. I see all the time students will get tongue-tied or something, and they'll just stop and apologize. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have. I just need a minute. I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay. And then they start again. Don't do that. I know it can seem like the thing to do, but if you lose your spot, if you get confused, if you mess something up, correct it, move on. That's it. Move on. Okay? Don't dwell. Last here now, other important tips: be in your best condition. What I'll tell you there is not to be dehydrated, aka hungover. Do think about using deep breathing techniques and muscle exercises as you're waiting to speak, not while you're speaking, but on the day of. If you feel your anxiety building, you could do a deep breathing exercise where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold empty for 4 seconds. This is called 4 square breathing. And it works in 2 ways. First, physiologically, you're limiting the oxygen that goes into your body. And when that happens, you have to slow things down or face more dire consequences. Psychologically, you are counting to 4 in your head over and over again, and you're no longer thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. This is a good way to calm your body, relax your mind, and hopefully gain some focus. Another thing that I found that works pretty well is if you're sitting down, for example, flex your quad muscles in your legs, right there, your big muscles on the tops of your legs. And get those just as tight as you can get them, and then dead weight them. I don't just mean relax, but just let them go as loose as you can. And then do it again. Do it a few times. What you'll find is that physiologically, your blood is moving down toward those muscles to supply their needs, which gets it away from the danger area up here. And 2, instead of, again, thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you're thinking flex, 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 and dead. Okay, no, don't just completely let it go. Grab it again. Okay, flex, flex, flex. You're playing mind and body games with yourself, and it's probably a good thing. Last tip on here is to nail the introduction. What I mean there is that if you start strong, it's easy to stay strong. If you start weak, it's harder to get strong as you go. So if you're going to practice any part of your speech more than another, make sure that you start it out right. And that way everybody will be on your page. Again, that's where the attention getter is coming into play. All right, so we have covered a few topics today. We talked about papers and presentations, some similarities and differences. We talked about course-based and conference or professional-based presentations. Again, similarities and differences. We talked about some basic structural things, an outline, and some kind of advanced content that seems pretty, workable, like a couple instances of repetition in a presentation. That small step can make a big difference. We talked about the clarity and repetition itself. And last, we talked about managing speech anxiety. So, even though you may not be at the mall selling a product, you're still selling your idea. So, let us help you do that. We can do this either virtual or in person now. We are back on campus. So, Monday through Thursday, we are available 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday, we're available 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And Sunday, you see there 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. When you go to our website, I'll show you in that in just a second. You're going to be able to choose a 30-minute or an hour-long consultation. Your needs probably will change as you progress. And so don't be afraid to ask for or schedule an hour-long consultation. So just briefly, let me pull something up here. Okay. We'll go here. Okay, so this is our Speech Lab website, gvsu.edu/speechlab. Here, you could just enter the virtual speech lab. No one's there now. We close at 1 on Fridays. But if you get confused, lost, or think no one is available, oh, we do have someone on the call. You could just click enter and then come here, and this will allow you to meet with whoever is working. They should have their cameras on. Otherwise, you can go and add an appointment. So click this to schedule a consultation, and you will see Book It open. Yours will look different than mine, but the key thing is the same. Up here, New Appointment. Then you see you can book with the Research Center, Digital Skills Partners, Writing Center, or the Speech Lab. I'm going to check on Speech Lab. Now, let me just plug the knowledge market for a quick minute before we move on. So important, I think, for you all. You all are doing research. You're writing papers. You are making visual aids and trying to show your information digitally, and you're giving a speech. Know about this resource. The idea behind this is that students just like you can go in sort of like a conveyor belt or something. You come in and you're starting out with the research. I have to gather sources. Okay, great, got those. Now I need to write the paper. Good, going to the Writing Center to do that. Now I need to create something visual to put in my paper and presentation. Now I'm going to bring all that together with my speech and go to the Speech Lab. It's really a win-win-win-win for you. And it's all, of course, included in tuition, so it's paid for already. Now, what you'll see here is a drop-down box. If you're coming in for a class, you can tell me that, but if it's a general session, because it's McNair, that's what you should click, just general session. Tell us if you need 30 minutes or an hour. You have an option to upload files, like if you have, let's say, worked on a PowerPoint and you want us to give you some feedback, you could upload it, and then when it's time to meet, we can do that, discuss it with you. You'll see here the location box. Make sure that you either select any face-to-face if that's what you want, right? An actual in-person consultation, or click virtual if that's what you're after. Let's see, let's go virtual. When do you want the appointment? I'm just going to say, well, let's limit it to the 25th. Select a consultant. If you know or want someone, you can do that, or any consultant works. Then click on the date and click a start time. You will see this message pop up, which details our privacy policy, which just says in a nutshell, if you come to the lab, we won't tell anyone that you were, that what we talked about. The only thing that we are required to confirm is your attendance. So we can say that you were there or not, but otherwise we don't have to release any info unless you tell us we can. And so you click on that, confirm and schedule, and you are all set. Now, the last thing I want to show you here is this. This is on the website. It's not finished yet. I've been working on this like just a fiend this week. I'm making this for a variety of purposes, but you are one of the key purposes, key reasons. During my time at Grand Valley, I have been asked to give a lot of different presentations, but they all sort of come back to the same questions. And I've described them like this. When you're preparing a presentation, you need to think about who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so what you can do with this website, gvsu.edu/speechlab/presentations. Okay, I will make sure that you get that. gvsu.edu/speechlab/presentations. If you click on this in the image here, this is a video that explains what's happening. I'll explain it to you. Click on who. Here, you can see that I've said you should ask and answer 2 who questions. Who are you and who is the audience? Then I've got some brief videos, none longer than I think 4 minutes, that explain the things you need to know about an audience, you introducing yourself to an audience, who they expect you to be, who you are in relation to this particular area versus overall. How do you want them to see you? And then, of course, audience analysis is right here. You know, who's in the audience? Why demographics information can be good, but it can also be very misleading. How to use it effectively. Are they supporting your position? Do they oppose your position? And then you can just continue here and go to what. There's 2 what questions. What's the core of the message? What obstacles are in your way? I discussed both. Then you have when, but it says why. I'll have to fix that. Sorry, still working on it. When is the presentation and when should you begin? And when do you set deadlines? Then we've got where. So where are you presenting? Is it virtual or traditional? And where do you want your relationship with the audience to be once you're finished? Do you want them to hire you? Do you want them to like you? Do you want them to respect you? What do you want? And so we will talk about how to figure all that out. I haven't put the video for this one up yet, but it's in the works. All right, we can move to the why-centered questions. And the first one is, why are you speaking? No, it's not because it's required. It's because it's communicating a message. You'll be specific. And the second is, why should the audience care? Even if you are hired by a group to do research and report back to them, give them a reason to care. Be explicit about it. You know, you should care about this because, and tell them. The last one is how. And you should ask things like, how can you deliver a presentation conversationally? Talk about what that is, how to do it, and how can you create an appropriate and attractive visual aid? And so I'll walk you through that process as well. And again, all of these are brief videos, but what you can also find on our website are video resources here that might be more to the point. So for example, effective PowerPoints is going to be sort of the follow-up to this quick how to do it in 3 minutes video. There are also guide sheets if you like things that are in writing instead of recorded, and we have those on a variety of topics as well. All right, so again, thank you for having me once again in the McNair program. I'm sorry that things got mixed up today. It's no big deal. We will make it work. I'm excited about working with you, and I hope we can meet in person soon. Take care, and if you need me, let me know. My email address is brownca1@gvsu.edu. And while I don't know the exact hours yet, I know you all will be working in the summer. The Speech Lab will be opened in the summer, and we'll have consultants available for you. So keep us posted. I'll be back, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great one.